Welcome to Season 2 of Build and Grow, a series dedicated to helping businesses go beyond financial management to achieve financial growth, resilience, and innovation. As businesses continue to revive and pivot to new models in these times, your story is proud to partner with HSBC for another season of inspiring conversations, insights, and observations from some of the newest trendsetters in business and stalwarts of the ecosystem. Tune in to power your next phase of growth and business continuity.
Vineeta, thank you so much for joining today. And like many of people who will be watching, I have to say that we are all very big fans of Sugar Cosmetics. It has come and how it has created a place for itself. So congratulations. Tell us, I've been told that you are in 10,000 plus retail outlets and across 130 cities. It's not any normal feat. Tell me about the journey, what you're building, what you're doing at Sugar.
Great. So before I start, I have to tell you, I've always been a very big fan of your story, and it's a real privilege being here with you. I think, I've seen your work, and you were a genuine believer and cheerleader of the ecosystem. And I always keep saying this, that entrepreneurs, more than anything else, like more than money, more than anything else, they need cheerleaders because it's a very long and hard journey. So having people in the media who are genuinely optimistic and positive about startups is a big blessing. So thank you so much. I'm actually very excited to finally have this opportunity to have a one-on-one with you. About Sugar, so it's been we launched Sugar about 5 years back. We started with an e-commerce company called FabBag, where we had beauty profiles of more than 200,000 women. And that they were at the center of the pivot that finally happened in terms of Sugar, which launched as a cosmetics brand. We launched as a digital first brand, and digital was the way to get to the hearts of these young millennial women who were our core customers. But of course, in India, you realize quite early on that, like, as on date, 95% of the market for cosmetics is offline. And we know that COVID has led to a lot of disruption, and e-commerce is going to grow very fast. But still, in 5 years, we're going to probably get to about 15% of the market being online. 85% is still shopping in general trade, modern trade, traditional retail. And so we realized that for us to be considered a serious brand, for us to really give a good fight to the Unilevers and the L'Oreals, we have to build omni-channel distribution. And that's why we embarked on the retail journey. The good thing about retail is that, the operating leverage that you have is actually very high. Like, once you put up a store, of course, there is CapEx involved, and, the first few months are hard. But after that, there is no concept of customer acquisition cost every single time. So once you get to like the economics of break even at a per store level, then from there onwards, it is very profitable. And of course, in India, it is very scalable. So hence omni-channel. In terms of what we're trying to do at Sugar, so, the whole idea was that 5 years back, what we really observed was that these young millennial women were very different from their moms and their predecessors in terms of the fact that they were beginning to wear more makeup on a regular basis and not just for special occasions and weddings. Secondly, they were inspired by other real women on social media and their friends rather than starstruck by celebrities. And then, of course, the big trend of shopping online. So in the last 5 years, we've seen the number of online shoppers. Women were 10% of the online shopper base 5 years back. Now it's more than 40%. And that has really changed the market in terms of how these millennials shop. And that inspired us to start Sugar. So we wanted to create a product, firstly, which would be for the girl on the move. So unlike their moms, they were traveling all day in pollution, local transport, they were stepping out, they were working women. And so they needed products that would make them unstoppable. So they wouldn't have to touch up all day. So we made products which are extremely long lasting, extremely weatherproof, and very suited for the tropical Indian weather. Secondly, we realized that, in India, there are very diverse skin tones. And unfortunately, the legacy brands were not creating products for the deepest and warmest of skin tones. For somebody like me, like Sugar has more than 10 shades of foundation which are mine or deeper skin tones, whereas a brand, a traditional legacy brand, would stop like just light at a shade lighter than my skin tone. And so we realized that there was a need to create products for women with warmer and deeper skin tones. And thirdly, of course, these millennials, they wanted to be in on global trends. Like they wanted to, see what's happening in Hollywood, but they wanted it Indianized in a way that suited their Indian aesthetic. So what we've done in the last 5 years is like really tried to focus on how to make the Indianized global trends and have products that are really cool and fit in with what's happening globally, but suit Indian aesthetic. And that's what the journey has been. We started as a digital brand. Our first, sugarcosmetics.com was our first a place where we retailed. And then, of course, Nykaa, Amazon products had fantastic reviews. Most of our products were like 4.5, 4.8 star. And that's when we started embarking on the retail journey. It's been, so that in the last 5 years, we've come a long way. Now we're at a net revenue run rate of 200. And, last quarter, we've been profitable. So far so good. And I think the market is very exciting right now for consumer brands. Finally, VCs have this arm called D2C, which 5 years back was absolutely unthinkable. So it's a good time to be in this space.
I want to ask you this. There are so many people, businesses, entrepreneurs who start, who embark on this, right? Like in different spaces when it comes to building brands. But what you have done, Vineeta, your team, what you've done very well is actually established a brand. Today, Sugar, you may buy, you may not buy, but of Sugar Cosmetics. And then today, because at Legacy, if you remember, we had very few names, but now today it stands for something, and then people are associating with it. If you had to tell us that what are the few things that you've done right to get where you are, because many people don't, many people haven't.
So, I'll tell you first what we did wrong. What we did was that, as a company which is really bottom line focused and trying to grow fast but profitably, what you end up doing is in the first few years, you end up spending all your, this category has good gross margins, right? So you make money per transaction, but you end up spending all of that in acquiring customers, because performance marketing is the easiest way for e-commerce companies to really grow fast, right? And it's in the last 5 years, the whole power of using the Facebook and Google ecosystem and growing, like doubling, tripling year on year. It's like a very, very, very trippy drug. So that's what we did, to begin with. And what we realized was that when you're on that journey, you're constantly on this treadmill trying to optimize CAC, etc. But every single time you have to get the consumer back, there is you're spending to get her back. So like you may do those fancy calculations where you say lifetime value is X and that's why my CAC of this much is justified, etc. But if you're have to spend every single time the consumer comes and shops with you, there's something wrong. And a couple of years back, in fact, it came as a push from one of our investors, and we realized that 95% of our marketing budget we were spending on performance marketing, and this wasn't really helping us establish ourselves as a brand. So we started thinking about it very differently, and we said that okay, we are going to like put cap how much we spend on performance marketing every year, and we're going to have two budgets, one for content marketing, and we created separate team, and one for brand marketing. Now the way we see it is content marketing is absolutely critical to our business because of two reasons. One is that makeup, whether it sells offline or it sells online, is very deeply linked to education. So the whole, like art of how to wear a winged liner or how to contour your cheeks or, which nude lipstick to wear is as important as, the fun of shopping that, having the eyeliner or the lipstick. That's one. Second is we realized that, wherever the consumer was shopping, 9 out of 10 of these customers were influenced by digital in their customer journey at some point. So we figured out that we have this amazing opportunity to build ourselves as a company which is very content first, which is creating content. And our first two platforms were really Instagram and YouTube, because Sugar's obsessed about like funky packaging and good looking products, and that whole visual storytelling around makeup could happen very beautifully on Instagram and on YouTube. And in the last 2 years, what we did was that we started putting all our energy. We got like a lot of passionate women on board who were genuinely excited about makeup, started creating all our content in house and distributing it on Instagram, on YouTube. And then we also launched our own app. So as it turns out, now we have every month, our engagement is more than 250 million on all these social media platforms. We have 1 million people who've downloaded the Sugar app, which was unthinkable earlier, right? People would think that, why would somebody download a brand's app when you already have like all the shopping apps on your phone? But the idea was that this was the one place where you could really learn about makeup, and you could really marry content and commerce. So I think the one thing that we did pretty well was, we were obsessed with the idea of using content and using digital and social media to reach the consumer, and do it in a very capital efficient way. So not really spend on really like expensive influencers, but really create our own content. And and we realized the consumer valued that. So we just hit 1.1 million followers on Instagram, and we are one of the largest brands over there. And I think these things don't require much investment. I mean, if you think about how much we spend on content, it's very little, but a lot of passion goes into creating stuff that consumers would really like. So that's been one part of it. Second is, of course, because we started doing retail, we realized that to be relevant, you have to do like some out of home campaigns, some mall media, a lot of in-store activation in terms of doing those makeup workshops, as well as come to the counter, get a free makeover done, and just you don't need to buy anything, those kind of activities. So we created a separate team for that. So I think one of the biggest things that we obsess about is that forget performance marketing. What are we doing to build the brand? And we are always, obviously it's a very long journey, and for us to really be relevant, it's going to take many years. But we have this little window to get ahead of our competitors by using digital well, and I think that's what we're obsessed with doing right now.
When you're telling this, then I can clearly see the passion. So so it reflects in Sugar, and then what I'm hearing from you very clearly, Vineeta, is that rather than obsessing about performance marketing, what you obsessed, of course, is the product, but more importantly, what you obsessed about is brand. And you are thinking long term rather than short term, and the numbers have come because of that. Yeah.
Yes,
Want to ask you, was it easy to convince investors? You've raised significant amount of capital. So tell us and tell everyone who's watching, what does it take to get venture capitalists to invest in a... And I'm sure now you are paving way, and you are a success story for many more who will go and get heard. But tell us, what was it like?
So it's been really hard for us. So there are a lot of factors why it's been hard to begin with. Of course, 5 years back when we started, there was no category called D2C consumer brands, right? So everybody thought that you would have to burn through a lot of money to even try to compete with the large FMCG brands, and where you're going to get money for celebrities and TV, etc. And apart from that, of course, Kaushik and I started this. We are both married, so I don't know, but there is, one is that most VCs are men, so they can't relate to cosmetics or the product, and they can't understand why somebody would want a lipstick which lasts 3 hours longer. Like, why can't you just apply it again? And secondly, of course, the whole doubts about like, will a married couple be able to build like a large team, and etc. So for various reasons, we struggled. So there's a long running joke. So India Quotient was our angel investor who invested in Fabbag many years back. Like, they came in with their first check in 2013, and after that, there's a long running joke that in the entire India Potion portfolio meets, whenever they discuss like the company which has taken the longest between seed and series A, then we're always number one at 58 months. So we hold like a record of like the slowest company.
Oh, but now they must be the proudest.
Yeah. So they've been, of course, super supportive at every stage, like to the extent that, there was one time that when we were pivoting to sugar, and obviously nobody wanted to come in with money because, at the time when you're pivoting, they want to check whether it's going to work or not. And we actually, launched two products, and the feedback was very good. And we had created like these four colors of lipstick and manufactured them and created them in our factory in Germany. And we didn't have money to import them and bring them and sell them. And we knew they were amazing, they were going to do really well, but there was no money. And it was literally at that time we just knew that for us to prove that sugar is going to work and it's really going to scale, 5 years back we needed some cash, and we went to India Quotient and asked them that just 1 crore, and this 1 crore we're really going to make it last year. Give us a bridge. And they said, listen, bridge and all we can't give because there is no logic for it, but we will lend you from our own carry money this 1 crore, but whatever happens, this money should not go down. And they had this crazy faith in us, and somehow we just ensured that 1 crore we really make it count. And then of course the series A, the series B happened. So in the last
nice.
in the last 3 years it's been very easy, the whole fundraising, etc., because also the market has changed and suddenly consumer brands have become cool. Of course companies like Boat and all have really led the way to show that they can go beyond the 500 600 crore, because everybody used to just assume that we'd all cap out at 100 crore and not be able to scale beyond that. So luckily, in the last 2-3 years, it's been much easier. So I would just say that, for anybody to predict as a company that, where the VC wind is going to grow, etc., is very hard, and you shouldn't even try, because, there are flavors of the season. Very incidentally, consumer brands are currently the flavor of the season, and we're lucky. But maybe 2 years later they're not. The only thing we can do as entrepreneurs is like really put our head down, build, like have very strong fundamentals. When your numbers are really, really, really strong, then it's not so hard to get multiple term sheets and get better terms. And we've sort of learned it the hard way. Beyond that, you can like really try pitching about market size and target addressable market and stuff. But if it fits in with that investor's thesis, they'll give you money. Otherwise, they won't, right? So that then it becomes like a pure, lucky chance sort of a thing.
But Vineeta, what I'm saying is that, but what you have to recognize in your journey also is that you proved it. You made the, you guys would be the first few who are building this category, right? With sugar, today, now there'll be 10, 20, hundreds of entrepreneurs who will use your example. And that brings back that you build the brand, you build the fundamentals behind it. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what our only thing is, that money may come, may not come, but whatever your consumer is paying you, whatever gross margin you're making, whatever cash flow you have, those are real numbers. So that is one thing no flavor of the season can take away from you. And if nothing else is working out in your fundraising journey, just focus on the fundamentals, just keep building, like, with like a little bit of debt, and keep trying to figure out how to grow slowly, because you never know when you can be at the right place at the right time. That's my, I've always like, you have to like start, and you have to stay at it for it to eventually be a situation where you realize, oh, I'm at the right place at the right time. Suddenly everybody wants to invest in this space. I don't think, when the edtech companies like really benefited from COVID, they were like, doing like this before that. Nobody started saying that, okay, COVID's come, let me start that. And, it's very rare that happens. So things happen for a reason. I really believe in, just focusing on the business, like, staying at it, being, consistent, and just focusing on the long term. And sometimes you end up being at the right place at the right time, and then funding happens.
Yeah, a lot of things make right things at the right time. Like, and I can see it. I can see that how you built it. And honestly, I see vision, and vision matched with pragmatism of getting the numbers, eyes on numbers while building a brand out of India. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
You know, just want to also understand in terms of, you just mentioned that your manufacturing was in Germany. Is it still
Yeah.
in Germany?
So we make it in a lot of countries, like 7 different countries. We have a very complex supply chain, and it's the good thing is that our team is like full of hustlers. So they love, basically what happens is that we have a lot of complex products. Like we have this foundation stick which comes with a brush at the other end, and it's like extremely matte and long lasting, so it works very well for the Indian weather. Similarly, we have like an eyebrow product which is like triangular tip. Now, for a lot of these very specialized products, unfortunately, in India, there aren't manufacturing facilities that can create those kind of products. So when it comes to like, like lipsticks and like more basic products, we try to see if we can manufacture them here, or at least fill them here, like, or get the bulk to India and then fill them here and then sell them. But for like more complicated products which help us differentiate ourselves, we make them either in Germany or in Korea or in Italy. These are the three largest locations where we manufacture our products apart from India.
Yeah. And that brings me to the question of the gross margin in your business. So two questions. I don't know how much can you answer and what you will answer, but two questions. There is a skepticism, at least for people like us, right? Like we feel that agar India mein bana hai cosmetics, so there'll be a lot of silicons and there'll be a lot of, it will not be pure. And that's why some of the international brands command that kind of a huge premium. And so one, around the product, the quality, and the second is because you can play around with your gross margins when you look at adding different things, chemicals to the product. How do you look at, while running a business which has to be profitable, which has to grow, has to have large numbers, how do you make both the
Yeah,
things happen?
yeah. So firstly, this whole thing about India, in India things can be easier is a myth, because I will tell you, we do have some distributors in international markets as well. The Indian FDA, especially the CDSCO that does the approvals for cosmetics, for especially those that are imported, is probably the strictest in the world.
Mm.
And cosmetics comes right under, like, along with food, like the along with drugs. So drugs that you ingest and cosmetics come under the same department, so they're obviously anal. Now if you look at certain things like heavy metals, like mercury, lead, arsenic, now globally FDA, different FDAs in different countries have like a limit saying that this many parts per million are allowed, this much is the limit, etc. India is the only country where it's zero, right? So
Mm.
like the FDA is really strict in terms of ensuring that the absolutely zero heavy metals present in the product. And many times we've had long battles with our manufacturers because they're like, when you put glitter in an eyeliner, it'll have that like little bit of mercury, and we're like, it's not allowed in India, you just can't have it, right? And they would like tell us that everybody from like the Chanels and the L'Oreals globally are using it, and you can't make a glitter eyeliner without that. But that's the norm in India. And so the regulation is actually very strict. The FDA actually checks everything at the import in terms of literally seeing that what are the ingredients. They will like randomly test those products to ensure that the ingredients claimed are correct. And then of course there is the whole Instagram police. So you can't, the kind of consumer we have on Instagram is so evolved. They probably like know as much about ingredients as some of our like sales girls who we spend so much time in training, and so they question everything. So I think we're at a time where there is no information asymmetry. Everything has to be reported on the back of the pack. There is a consumer who's extremely aware, especially the young millennial consumer. Like they're reading the ingredients of their food products, they're also reading the ingredients on the back of their makeup. And then you have a very, very strict FDA, probably the strictest in the world as far as imported are concerned. If you're making it in India, it's slightly easier because it comes under the state FDAs, but any import goes through a very strict lens because they're worried about like gray market imports coming in with like products that are harmful. So I think there is there are multiple checks and balances apart from our own conscience. For us, what we do is obviously like trying to like set up a very large lab with clinical trials to test everything is hard. So what we do is we just ensure that we only work with manufacturers who work with like the best brands in the world. So and we go through, they will have like create their own certificate of analysis and their testing reports which they share with you. So we know that when you work with the best manufacturers, they will they know that the fear of getting an FDA audit is so high, they will not take any shortcuts or add any products that could be harmful. The thing about the industry is that in spite of all of this, in spite of ensuring that the products are absolutely safe for someone to use, it does have very high gross margin, which is why I think if you look at and you enter a mall, you'll see that makeup counters are always a first, right? And that's always, and that's been there for 100 years. It's probably the only industry where over hundreds of years the gross margins have really held up, because of the fact that it's a some people purchase it for the fact that it makes them feel good. It's like just an impulse buy. You just feel like it. You don't feel the need for the fourth red lipstick. You just want to buy because it makes you feel happy or makes you feel good about yourself. And which is why the whole packaging experience, the whole the how the makeup artist at the counter sells it to you, or even online, how the entire shopping experience is, how the package is delivered, all of these things matter. And that's where we end up spending that gross margin that we make on the product, apart from of course the
But roughly, what would be the like industry standard? What would be the gross margin?
It's again, if you were to do D2C, it would be as high as 80%.
Wow.
But if you were to do of course, if you were to like be available through other retailers, etc., on average the industry operates in the 60 to 80% range.
Brilliant, no?
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask you on something that you mentioned. You've started this with your husband, Kaushik.
Yeah.
Tell us, how is it to have a co-founder who's your life partner? There's so many myths around that also, right? Like, of course, no size fits all, and everyone will have different experience. But it's a successful partnership. Tell us.
Yeah. Actually, we love it. It's first couple of years were very hard because obviously we do have a lot of difference of opinion, like any two co-founders would. So first 2 years it was really hard because we had to really be very clear about what would be, where the final say would be his, where the final say would be mine. And then still, like, after like very clearly defining roles, and we actually put it on a piece of paper, when we started off saying that these are yours and these are mine, and this is where your final say, this is my final say. And even after that, there'll be something that ends up being very gray and in the middle, and we have like a lot of arguments about that. Our approach to a lot of things are different. We are fundamentally like, like I was giving somebody the example that for instance, philosophically, he's somebody who thinks that no deal is better than a bad deal, and I always believe bad deal is better than no deal. So we'll always be like, should we settle for this or not? Would be like one of those classic cases where we have like a difference of opinion. And but I think once over a period of time, now that we know how to respect that the other person's opinion as well, and we sort of have figured out a way to know where to put our foot down and where to just adapt and just agree with the other person, because it matters so much more to the other person. And at home as well, so like for instance, first starting up was one big thing where first few years we were like really fighting in office, and our colleagues would wonder that, oh my god, they're really loudly fighting. And then we figured it out. Then of course when we had kids, it always adds this second level of friction, right? Around the kids' responsibilities and stuff. So although I thought that in the first few months, when a child is born, it's like easier to have your co-founder taken more of the step up and like do more of the work. As somebody who's very likes to do what I do, I would want the other way. I would be like, I want to do more of that, and you help with the babysitting. So of course there were like a lot of differences around how we handle chores. And then, we figured out like a sort of a balance between like how to split our chores. And then of course the third time that it again came up was COVID, obviously, when suddenly like all help was gone, and then we were again on our own, and there was so much work and kids and at home, and obviously a lot of stress around quarter one being almost zero revenue and stuff. So again, that was the third point. But now that we've survived these three big opportunities to really rock the boat, and we've come out of it alive, I think we're very strong as a team. And we're so different in terms of like I'm more of an introvert, he's more of an extrovert. So the kind of things that he likes to do, like he's like he likes to art, marketing, etc. I'm more numbers person. So because of the fact that I think we make a fantastic team, we've managed to look at the bigger picture, focus on the long term, and live through all of this. So if it works out, it's amazing, because the kind of trust and the kind of comfort you have, it's unparalleled. Of course, work-life balance does go for a toss. He recently tweeted that on 14th Feb, like I woke up in the morning, I'm like, oh what, 10 days to board meeting, and he's like, yeah, it's also something else today. Like Valentine's Day. But yeah, so there is no like personal time. We're all the time talking about work. And our kids also hate it. But yeah, I think there are like pros and cons to everything. But if it works out, it's the most beautiful partnership, I think, that one can have.
Wow. This is one of the very, very, very honest and beautiful answers that I've heard in a long time. This is like a journey, right? Two people making a journey together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not, I don't think there is in any relationship, there is any steady state where you're like, okay, now it's set. You have to keep figuring out, like each of us have our pressure points and things that make us break and things that make us stick, and you have to keep evolving. I don't think there is any you can say in any co-founder relationship or any marriage that now we've achieved like permanent bliss. And I think the way we survive crisis really defines us and helps us get closer or farther apart, whatever.
Yeah, no, very, very true. Very true. How did you get the name Sugar?
So we wanted a name which has like which is very easy and has a very international feel, and sugar was right there. I often joke that the logic of sugar is that you get a sugar rush without the calories, and that's why we call it sugar, because women just wear makeup because they do it for themselves. So it's like you get a good high without having to take the calories. But that wasn't the logic. We just loved the name. Kaushik came up with it, and we just thought that it had like this like global feel to it, and it was very easy to remember. Yeah, some distributor in like some small part in Tinsukia would be like consumer is asking if there's chini in this, because it's called sugar. So there is like like all kinds of misnomers around the name as well that come up. And India is such a super diverse country that you will have all kinds of people, from those who say that, man, I won't buy it because it will give me diabetes, and those who say that doesn't have sugar in it, to of course millennial women who love the name. So yeah, I think it's been interesting. I mean, I think the name has its pros and cons, but we love it. We wouldn't have any other name.
I also love it. It's a brilliant name. It's a brilliant.
Thank you.
What are some of the things that you're planning now? Today you've established, you're growing. Of course, you have to go deeper. But if I have to say that, what you're envisioning with Sugar?
So we've just, if we look at like the consumers that we have, like in 2020, we realized that almost like 50% of our customers are actually very metro tier 1 millennials. And what we've realized is that there is also this large number of aspirational young women in tier 3, tier 4 cities who are now beginning to either shop online or at least get inspired by social media on what they want to buy. And so we think that there is a very big opportunity that from this 10,000 stores that we have, we can actually be in about 40 to 50,000 stores across more than 200-300 cities, and like have much deeper distribution in tier 3, tier 4. So we think that sugar has a potential to grow from where it is to, like literally being in the top 3 brands in India. And when you have to be that, then you probably have to be at like say a 500 crore net revenue and very deep distribution. But we're seeing initial traction, and that's where we want to go.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. We are all rooting for you, because
Thank
this
you
is,
so
we
much.
say made in India. This is like so coolly, sugarly made in India brand that we are all very
Made
proud.
for India, not completely made in India, but definitely made for India.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Do you plan to go to different markets outside the country?
So we do have some distribution. The interesting thing about like markets like US and Middle East is that there are some consumers who are very similar. So a lot of South Asians, for instance, in the US, there is, Middle East, there is like the weather as well as the skin tones are very similar. The preference for like dark eyes and matte makeup is similar. So we do have some, distribution already in the US. We do have some upcoming plans of expansion to the Middle East as well. But I don't imagine that in the next 5 years, given how amazing and the Indian market is and how fast it's growing, like one of the fastest in the world. So we would, if we do, these would be probably like 5-10% of our revenue. Our focus is going to be in India. We're going to keep building for the Indian consumer. It's not as easy to say that you can build for the Indian consumer and the Southeast Asian consumer, for instance, because makeup is a very, very skin tone, weather dependent product. And so we want to focus our energy on where we think like our biggest strength is and where the biggest action is. Like all the brands want to come into India. Why would we want to miss out on the opportunity to be a leader in this like really fast growing market?
Wow. I'm getting a sugar rush listening to you.
That's
Last,
the idea.
before I let you go, you know, Vineeta, I want to ask you again, two things. What anchors you? What anchors you in this journey of ups and downs, and touch wood now, more of ups and ups? What keeps you anchored? And second thing is, uh, while with the anchoring, what keeps you driven in the worst of days?
So, again, because you say ups and downs, I think the only thing that I've realized in my very long entrepreneurship journey, I did my first startup in 2007, and it's been like really long, and I've, still not seen something which is, I've still not, for instance, had an IPO or whatever the gold standard is. The only thing that I know is that, like when things are good, they're not as good as they seem. When things are bad, they're not as bad as they seem. So, and the only thing guaranteed when you're running a company is that whenever you have a high there will be a low, and then like for instance when we crossed 100 crore, we were on this crazy momentum, and then of course COVID hit, and almost like 6 to 8 months that got completely lost. It was something we couldn't have expected. So now that we're back in that momentum zone, I don't take it for granted, and I don't think that there is any way for any founder to actually build like a very large sustainable company without going through all those ups and downs. I've come to a place where uh, I'm a very strong believer in the power of compounding. I really believe in being patient, being consistent, staying at it. I'm also a marathon runner, so it's in my
Yeah.
DNA. And that's what for me, that's what matters. That I don't put my life on hold. Like I didn't think that I should not have my kids because of the fact that I want to first do IPO and then have kids or whatever. I would I think that I just love what I do, and I don't know what will come out of it, but as long as I get the opportunity to work with these really inspiring people, like 80% of our colleagues are women. Like we have more than 1,500 women who work in those various stores and in the office, and a lot of them have these amazing stories. Many of them are sole breadwinners. That really drives me. My only thing is that these colleagues of mine, and our investors who invested in us through thick and thin, like 8 years back, and ever since, even after that, I just don't want to let them down. So that's the only thing that drives me, that this faith that these employees of ours, these 1,500 women, these investors have put in us. I just want to make sure that that faith gets rewarded. I don't let them down, and that's what drives me. And beyond that, I've gone through so many failures in the last 14 years that I whenever there's a good time, I know that there's going to be some crisis around the corner. So I never take any celebration too seriously. But yeah, of course, I know that it's such a long journey. I might as well enjoy it. So every smallest milestone. When we had this funding round, the joke is that between the term sheet and the final SHA, I think Kaushik and I opened like champagne 6 times to celebrate. Like, we're like, okay, one small milestone, because at the end of the day, that's what you have, right? Life is like full of these small milestones. Might as well enjoy the journey, because it's going to be long. If you keep thinking that okay, destination hasn't come, then there is like so much stress and pressure, which is I don't think is worth it. I think so I'm not waiting for that one day when we'll IPO. I'm just living the dream every day, I think.
Vineeta is such an authentic person, and to me, what I'm also taking, and everyone watching would take, is that being authentic to yourself, to what you're building, makes the magic happen. Comes. Yeah. Last question. I've been told that I've not asked you. We are doing this Money Matters show. What has money meant to you personally? What does money mean to you?
I haven't yet seen a lot of money, honestly. The irony of my life is that when I graduated at 23, I had this investment banking offer, which was at that time converted to INR, and 1 crore offer. And I still joke that I still don't make that much money. I still I don't think a lot about I'm okay to stay in a rented house and I have some rented furniture. Like today I got a Falenco fridge because my previous fridge broke down and I needed it urgently. I truly believe that money is a notion. It's important because of the fact that it's fuel for the business, and it's like a important milestone for everybody who's your employees, for investors. So that's why money is important, and that's why the number of getting to a certain revenue, certain valuation, etc., matters to us, because it matters to everybody in the ecosystem. For me personally, I really believe that if you just put in the work, you're patient, money will come. I approach money the same way that I approach my business, which is be consistent, be patient, believe in the power of compounding. Look at it long term. Don't think of things short term. Focus on the long term, and money will happen. Don't feel the pressure to rush or get rewarded too quickly. Marathoners have the highest level of delayed gratification in their DNA. I have extreme delayed gratification in my DNA. I have no rush to become rich quickly. I'm in it for the long run, and I think that's what helps me focus on what really matters to me.
Wow. This is very inspiring. Vineeta Singh, please make sure that there's sugar in everyone's life, and very proud of you. And I'm sure everyone watching would be so proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shraddha. As I said again, I've been very proud and very inspired by your journey as well, and really, really looking to see your story become absolutely mainstream in India. And and that's what we need. Like the entire startup ecosystem needs that.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to meeting. I'm very inspired today. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.